Now, disabled students who attend Victoria Education Centre in Poole are protesting at Branksome railway station later today. They're angry that there's no provision for wheelchair users to access the platforms and argue it's also difficult for the elderly and those with limited mobility. Our reporter Steve Lanham is there for us this morning, and he's joined by Poole Councillor Philip Eades, who's campaigning for disabled and elderly access as well. So, Steve, just good morning to you, and starting with you, how tricky is it for people to get onto the platforms if you're a wheelchair user?
Good morning, Julian. Well, to be honest, it's fairly tricky because this is a lovely old Victorian station, but of course it comes from a time when accessibility wasn't really considered when they built it. And I took a little look inside to see what the station and the platforms were like, and there's two steep sets of steps that lead down to the platform, and it'd be very, very tricky for people in a wheelchair to make it down to the platform, or even people in a mobility scooter, or even people with pushchairs. So it's fairly steep steps for someone who's able-bodied, but for people who have things to carry or aren't so able to, it's very, very difficult.
Now, you've been talking to disabled people who I know later want to get their message across. What have they been saying?
That's right, Julian, yes, and around 12:30 today we expect them to gather here to try and persuade Network Rail to do something about this. Now, in terms of what Network Rail have had to say, we contacted them for some answers and they issued this statement. It came from the South West Trains Network Rail Alliance. They say most of the rail network was built many generations ago when the needs of passengers with reduced mobility were regrettably not taken into account. We are working hard to put that right and invest hundreds of thousands of pounds every year on improvements such as the introduction of lower counter ticket windows, handrails and accessible toilets. Now, the Department for Transport's Access for All scheme provides funding for larger accessibility schemes. Those using Branksome Station who are unable to access the platforms are currently offered a free taxi service to Bournemouth when they book travel assistance through our dedicated passenger assistance helpline. Now, that of course is not much consolation to the students who at Victoria Education Centre right now, and yesterday I took a trip down there to speak to them and asked them what the situation was like for them.
Really difficult because it's not wheelchair accessible and you can't really get down the stairs to get to the station.
It's quite annoying because we only can go out on the bus short or mini budget, and say we want to go out on the group, we had to book a minibus.
Well, it's quite frustrating because I live at the school and I can't go out to see my friends very easily. I can either go on public bus or I've got to rely on staff at school to drive me around.
It's hard because I want to be able to go out with my friends and I can't.
And what changes would you like to see made to the station in order for it to be more usable?
I would like to actually to have a lift and more accessible so wheelchairs can get on and off.
Just simply a lift so that we can get down to the platform.
It's super nice from going out on school trips for like life skills and it's really important for us to learn life skills so we know what we're doing in the future.
Well, listening to that is Councillor Philip Eades, a Poole councillor campaigning for disabled and indeed elderly access as well. Philip, what's your reaction to what you've just heard?
Well, absolutely, Julian. I heard that when I visited the school just before Christmas, and the students there said this: one of the biggest issues they face in life is moving about safely and easily in public. And they highlighted to me the issue of Branksome, where the steep steps, and indeed they can't even get through the door of the station because there's such a steep step to get into the station itself. So they raised that issue with me, and I decided to take it up on their behalf.
And is the answer a lift or something else?
Oh, I think it probably is a lift. I mean, Branksome is an example of Victorian infrastructure, and unfortunately the government exempts them from the DDA Act, Disability Discrimination Act. It probably needs a rebuilding programme which includes a lift, yes.
We did a similar story at Folkestone Station a while back, and these sorts of issues continue to come up. Is that because of the exemption in the DDA, because of the kind of properties they are?
Well, that's right. I mean, you can understand the issue that when they were built 140 years ago, Branksome Station, this issue wasn't considered. Well, to be frank, we're in 2015 now, and, the government ought to make provision, and there is a scheme there, but only 2 schemes in the southwest in the last year were funded, Torquay and Truro. They're both an awful long way from Folkestone and Branksome. And really it's quite bizarre for them to say disabled people are offered a free taxi ride to Bournemouth. I mean, all the money spent on providing free taxis to Bournemouth could be spent here providing better access at Branksome Station.
Philip, thank you very much indeed for that. Very grateful to Councillor Philip Eades, joining us live from Branksome Station this morning with our reporter Steve Lanham at 17 minutes past 7. Hilary Stewart is alongside Steve there, who is one of the teachers at the Victoria Education Centre. Good morning, Hilary.
Good morning, Julian.
Thanks for being there this morning. I mean, that's the reason we're given, is that, it's a building, it's consequently, it's a building from Victorian era, and consequently it doesn't have to do anything. What's your reaction to that?
Well, it is a very attractive building. It's been here a long time, but things have moved on, and views regarding disability access have changed tremendously, even in the last 20 years, and we're now at a point where everybody, our whole community, should be able to access all the services that are out there. Our students would love to be able to travel independently. I'd love to be able to take them out in groups, into town, to do all our life skills work, to show them how to open bank accounts, order a meal, all sorts of important functional skills that are going to help them take their place in society. But at the moment, we just can't do that. We can travel one at a time on a bus, if we can get a wheelchair on the bus. You can imagine if you were going to take a class, that could take you all day just to get to your destination. So we would like to see just some simple changes made so that not just our students, but anybody with mobility issues can get onto the station and can travel and get out and about.
Now, the South West Trains Network Rail Alliance gave us a statement, which we read out in full in the last hour, but just to reiterate the main themes. One is that the building is old, and we ought to bear that in mind, and obviously in those days they didn't take into account people who are wheelchair users. They say they're working hard to put it all right and investing hundreds of thousands of pounds a year into these kind of improvements. They say the Department for Transport's Access for All scheme provides funding for larger accessibility schemes, but at Branksome, those who are unable to access the platforms are currently offered a free taxi service to Bournemouth when they book travel assistance through their dedicated passenger assistance helpline. I mean, does the taxi service, Hilary, make a difference?
Well, when we're talking about taking a class out, is it realistic to book a fleet of taxis to take a number of students down into Bournemouth to do some work or do some learning in the town centre? I don't think so. And also, our students would like to be able to be independent. That's the key for their future. It's not about having to rely on others. We appreciate the offer that's there, but, there's a much bigger issue here. Access for all is something that in 2015 I think we should be able to expect.
Is it time to put a lift in?
I think so, don't you?
Well, let's see what people have to say. I want to thank you for coming on today, Hilary, and indeed Steve Lanham. Hilary Stewart, who's one of the teachers there at the Victoria Education Centre, and of course that protest from the students a little bit later on. It's 8:16.